Hello, my name is Sergi, and I'd like to ask you a question. Do you remember when not too long ago we all voted for someone to be our great country's leader? Sure, most of us spend our personal time watching debates, following the news, doing our own research on which guy we thought would be a perfect fit. But have you ever wondered if your very own vote actually counted or made a change in the elections? Does the US voting system actually work and ensures that your vote makes a difference? If not, is there an alternative way that guarantees that your vote will change the outcome of elections? Today, you will learn that our current voting system is not that great, and an alternative system will make elections fair to everyone.
Hi, I'm your next president, but you can just call me Josh. I know I just scream and look presidential, but here, one moment. Yeah. All the polls are saying it's either me or that liberal schmuck you hate so much. Of course, we know that you'd like to vote for Alejandro Gonzahuzet over there, but he'll be too busy mowing my lawn.
I'm gonna count it.
Yeah? Tuesdays work for you? All right. You may have noticed that we have a two-party system in this country. The only time a third-party candidate has ran and mattered was when Ross Perot ran in '92, and he had to spend $12 million of his own dollars to do it. I don't think Alejandro cuts that many hedges. I'd bet that you don't even know why we have a two-party system. Sure, there's the illusion that your vote matters, but don't kid yourself. Your vote has never mattered, and it will never matter. Besides, this dog and pony show's paid for by my friends like Solyndra and Big Pharma. The United States, like most countries, runs on a plurality vote system, sometimes called first past the post. Of course, we complicate it a little with our electoral college, which breaks the 50 states and the District of Columbia into 51 little melting pots. These states vote by sending representatives to a convention. The number of votes a state gets matches the state's congressional number. And most of these states simply vote for whoever won their popular vote. So Oregon, for example, with 2 senators and 5 congressmen, gets 7 votes. Unfortunately for all you equality nuts, this favors the small states. Because states have a minimum of 3 votes, even if they're really vacant, like that backwater Wyoming. Not to offend my Wyoming voters, all 9 of them. So, in a plurality system, no one even needs a majority. Hell, I could win with 5%, as long as everyone else has less than me. Which leads me to the spoiler effect. A wonderful little quirk that keeps you sheep voting for the lesser of 2 evils. Funny story. In 1912, Woodrow Wilson won the Democratic nomination to run for president in the 1912 election. This pleased his financial backers, a conniving, wealthy clique of banking families, the Morgans, Rockefellers, and Warburgs, who had Wilson pinned to sign a central banking bill. He was the only candidate willing to do it, you see. Unfortunately for them, it looked like Wilson was going to lose in the general election to the Republican nominee, William Howard Taft. And Taft would never sign a central banking bill. Luckily for these shifty bankers, good old Rough Rider Teddy Roosevelt was a power-hungry, popular guy with shifty morals. And he'd recently split with the Republicans. He was also willing to let them slip him some campaign contributions to get up and running on the progressive ticket. Of course, they didn't plan on him winning. They just wanted to split the Republican vote between Taft and Roosevelt. And they did, letting Wilson win with a minority 41% of the popular vote. So I hope you like the Federal Reserve, income tax, and World War II, because the spoiler effect gave you all 3. Well, to be fair, World War II, Wilson really didn't know his policies would put Hitler into power, but they did. Look it up. So why only 2 parties? Great question. This is an interesting phenomenon called Duverger's Law, which says that any plurality system, like ours, will inevitably devolve into 2 parties. Sound familiar? But why, you ask? Well, essentially, you'll vote for a candidate that has a chance of winning, like me, instead of the one you really want to win, because your preferred candidate has no chance, and you really don't want that liberal schmuck to win. So, I am the lesser of two evils. Of course, you live in a country that smiles at you and assures you your vote counts, and that every vote is important. It's not like there's any alternatives anyway. Well, to be fair, some nut jobs have tried to cut out the Electoral College and just vote en masse, which, don't get me wrong, sounds great. Everyone across the whole country would have an equal say, right? Problem with that is you'd just be handing power from the tiny states to the large ones. I mean, really, think about it. Why would I bother campaigning for Vermont's 600,000 votes when California has 38 million? Then all my campaign promises are going to go to California. You see, you just can't win. Now go watch American Idol. I have to approve a bill I haven't read.
Queen Lion of the Animal Kingdom is displeased. She recently introduced elections for the office of king using the first-past-the-post voting system. While her empire started out as a healthy democracy with many parties running candidates for king, they quickly devolved into two-party rule, with the citizens not liking either one but trapped with the system because of a problem called the spoiler effect. However, one of Queen Lion's subjects from a distant land, Neil, has a solution: the alternative vote. What's the difference? To find out, let's follow one of the voters on election day, Red Squirrel, under both systems. There are 5 candidates running for king. 2 of the bigger parties are Gorilla and Leopard, and 3 other candidates, Turtle, Owl, and Tiger. Under first past the post, Red Squirrel gets a ballot where he picks just one candidate. Red Squirrel really likes Turtle and even campaigned for him. However, he knows that his new neighbor Gray Squirrel is gonna vote for Gorilla. Red Squirrel starts to wonder, what about all the other animals? Who are they gonna vote for? The debates on Animal News Network only had the big parties, so Red Squirrel thinks it's gonna be a close race between Gorilla and Leopard. While he doesn't really care about Gorilla, he is deathly afraid of Leopard, because he can only pick a single candidate. So he gives his one vote to Gorilla in hopes of preventing Leopard from becoming king. This is strategic voting, and it is a necessity under first past the post. But now, let's look at the alternative vote, which Neil explains to Red Squirrel. Instead of picking one and only one candidate, he can rank them in order of his most favorite to his least. He goes into the voting booth and gets the same ballot as before, but now puts Turtle as his first choice, Owl as his second, and Gorilla as his third. He dislikes Leopard and Tiger equally, so he stops filling in his ballot and drops it in the box. At this point, Red Squirrel doesn't care exactly what happens. He has other things on his mind and he heads off. But you, dear citizen, want to know how the votes are counted, so here it goes. Turtle comes in the last place with only 5%. And he's eliminated from the race. Because the voters ranked their candidates in order, we know what would have happened if Turtle didn't win. Without Turtle, voters like Red Squirrel would have picked Owl instead. So their votes are transferred to her as though Turtle was never in the race at all. This is why alternative vote is something called instant runoff voting. It's able to simulate a bunch of elections where the least popular candidate is eliminated after each round without all the time and expense it would take to run a bunch of campaigns one after another. The alternative vote method keeps eliminated the least popular candidate until someone either wins a majority or is the only one left. As no one has a majority yet, the next lowest candidate, Tiger, is eliminated. Tiger voters listed Leopard as their second choice, so she gets Tiger's votes. In the last round, Gorilla is eliminated. Gorilla voters listed Owl as their second choice, so Owl gets these votes, wins majority, so is crowned king. The alternative vote is a better system because it produces winners that a large number of voters agree on. While the alternative vote does have flaws, it's important to note that any problem alternative vote has, first past the post also shares. They're both susceptible to gerrymandering, they aren't proportional systems, they can't guarantee a Condorcet winner, which math geeks hate, but there isn't time to explain now. And over time, they both trend toward two main parties. That being said, alternative vote has a huge advantage that first past the post lacks and makes it mathematically superior method. No spoiler effect. Imagine one final election. 2 big candidates are running, Gorilla and Leopard. And Leopard looks set to win 55% to 45%. But then, a third party candidate, Tiger, enters. Tiger manages to convince 15% of the Leopard voters to back him instead. Under first past the post, Gorilla now wins, even though a majority of the voters didn't want him. Under the alternative vote, because all Tiger voters put Leopard as second choice, Leopard still wins because the majority of the citizens of the animal kingdom would rather have her in charge than Gorilla. Using the alternative vote, citizens can help support and grow smaller parties that they agree with without worrying they will put someone they don't like into office. After examining the differences, Queen Lion orders that the alternative vote is to be the rule of the land for electing the king, and everyone is happier. Well, almost everyone. The two big parties can be as complacent as they used to be and need to campaign much harder to convince their voters to support them.
Presidential campaign fundraising, problems and solutions. In the last presidential race of our nation, the candidates raised and spent more than $2.5 billion in campaign funds. This includes spending for the candidate, for the national party, and the outside. The blue team amassed a total of $1.1 billion in spending, and the red team totaled with $1.3 billion. Now, $1 billion could buy out all the Super Bowl ads in 4 whole Super Bowls. In this day and age, with most, if not all, our information being consumed by big media, most of our goods and services being created by big corporations, there is clearly power in the top echelons of these groups. This is clear when you see that Barack Obama's top contributors were University of California, Microsoft Corporation, Google Inc., and Harvard University. Mitt Romney was backed by Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan and Company, and Wells Fargo. Fun fact for you, the left wing is so confident of their vote in California, they will seldom campaign in the state and only show up for fundraising with media excluded from these events. So let's investigate the system. Historically, all presidential candidates had the option to take public funding. This gave the qualified candidate federal government funds to pay for the valid expenses of their political campaigns in both the primary and general elections. National political parties also receive federal money for their national nominating conventions. The reason I am speaking in past tense is this trend is becoming obsolete as no public funds were spent in 2012 elections. As outside groups gain increased freedom to spend unlimited amounts of cash on advertising of their own, more and more presidential candidates are choosing to fund their campaigns with private contributions. Now, if you take public funding and the associated spending limits as John Kerry did, there is not enough to even respond to smear tactics by an opposing party that have went the unlimited finance path. These funds were intended for all candidates to have a leg up, no matter what the corporation's purse strings they had access to. However, the folks involved with getting the red or blue team to take the presidential title, when asked, deem spending limits and public funding as an outdated practice. And by what is almost a rule in our country, being what is big keeps getting bigger, today we have the Super PAC. These committees make no contributions to candidates or parties. They do, however, make independent expenditures in federal races, running ads or sending mail or communicating in other ways with messages that specifically advocate for the election or defeat of a specific candidate. There are no limits or restrictions on the sources of funds that may be used for these expenditures. In 2012, 67% of Super PAC money came from conservative groups. This equaled to almost 670,000. The dark side here is the limits on how a politician can spend PAC money are not especially strict. Super PACs may raise unlimited sums of money from corporations, unions, associations, and individuals, then spend unlimited sums to overtly advocate for or against political candidates. So this brings us to the overarching problem. Any way you look at the amount of money spent, there is no reason to be spending billions of dollars each 4 years just to have a leader in this country. Furthermore, the funds and the responsibility that comes with it are lessening from the pocketbooks of the citizens and the giant power-hungry corporate entities that step in to sway the elections. The most recent and relevant example is the Koch brothers, as the second wealthiest family in America, plan to spend $889 million during the 2016 election cycle. The reactions of many prominent political leaders is shock at the injustice of this clear attempt to buy the election. In the last presidential election, Obama and Romney raised about $1 billion each. The Koch brothers, the second wealthiest family in America, now say they will raise nearly $1 billion for the 2016 elections, said independent Senator Bernie Sanders. When one family can raise as much as an entire party, the system is broken. This is oligarchy, not democracy. And in case you are wondering, the point of their backing is not out of goodwill, but a clear agenda. According to Paul Begala, the top strategist of the PAC, a Republican president could roll back environmental protections, worker protections, and consumer protections, which would benefit the Kochs and their corporations. Clearly, campaign funds are increasing without limit. The elections are becoming buying strategies rather than informative and democratic elections. Money is manipulating at least and buying out politics as what is becoming the norm. The party funding raising system in Germany. As a consequence of Hitler's rise to power in 1933, political funding has been a point of intensive reform in German politics following World War II. Political finance legislation started in 1967 and by 1983 was more comprehensive than other established democracies around the world. Spending by German parties, which, by the way, happens right here, and we are here, holds a medium-range position among democracies, old and new. German parties spend most of their funding on the routine operation of an impressive full-time organization, nationally and in the field. There are two major and two minor sources of revenue for German parties. On average, public subsidies as well as membership dues each provide 1/3 of all party income. The final third of total revenue is raised from donations and by assessment of incumbents, mostly in the municipalities. The current elements of the German political finance regime are regulated by Article 21 of the Basic Law. The Act on Political Parties regulates how parties are financed in Germany and the level of public funding they are allowed to receive. The criterion for the distribution of these funds is the extent to which the parties are rooted in society. This is measured, firstly, by how many votes a party gained in the most recent European Bundestag and land parliament elections. Second, the amount of money raised through members' subscriptions, contributions made by office holders, and legally obtained donations is also factored into the decision. The amounts of public money that flow to the parties entitled to receive state funding are set on the 15th of February each year. The decision is taken by the president of the German Bundestag, to whom the Act on Political Parties, Section 19A1, assigns this executive function. The top two candidates for the election spent a little more than $228 million in the 2009 election year. That is a humble fourth of what the United States candidates spend. To aid the thrifty campaign, there are accommodations by the public media networks to provide an accessible communication with free airtime on radio and TV to all, and I repeat, all competing parties, as well as billboards paid for by municipal authorities. Since the 1970s, corporate donations on the whole have dramatically lost their previous importance. 4 events or decisions had a part to play in the reform. Number 1, tax benefits for political donations were limited to individual donors in small amounts by Supreme Court ruling. Number 2, various scandals have raised awareness of parties, donors, media, and the general public. Number 3, parties get reliable funding for their most important needs via public grants. And 4, there's no need to buy access to politicians or influence peddling because sufficient non-financial channels for both types of lobbying are available. The system is regulated by law and the government, which creates a functioning way of accounting every dollar, as well as putting a cap on how much one can spend. The citizens of the nation have a good third invested in the finance process, so therefore the connection is closer and people have a more valuable and meaningful voice. By seeing the extremes of what power can do to a nation and the world, Germany has stepped up to make regulations, set a structure into place, and become a prominent example of fairness to every candidate for the sake of true democracy.
Hello, my name is Derwin Mamouad. I will be going over one of the concerns in the United States voting system. A concern in the United States voting system is voting manipulation. The United States uses an optical scan voting system, which uses paper ballots. Possible attacks on this system have been demonstrated. The votes can be manipulated if an attacker obtains a blank ballot and convinces a voter to take the ballot to a polling station. Anyone setting up the election has access to the files. This makes the files vulnerable. Venezuela has a possible solution to improving the security of the United States voting system. Venezuela has a very secure election system because they have been successful in using the most technologically advanced systems in the world. They use touchscreen electronic devices. The votes are encrypted and stored in the machine's memories. Voters verify their vote using a printed receipt. Then, an electronic copy of the official tally is sent to the servers in the National Electoral Council's central facility, where the votes are electronically calculated. I think if the United States were to use a technology-advanced voting system like Venezuela, manipulation of the votes would no longer be a concern. Thank you.